I don't have anything lighthearted or quippy to say about this, so let's just get right into the review. So today, my folks and I went to go see a very important movie, in my opinion. It's called Sound of Freedom, and it stars Jim Caviezel and Eduardo Verástegui. And in my opinion, this is a movie everyone should watch, just to make yourself aware of the horrendous stuff that is going on when it comes to children and child trafficking and sex rings, sex slave rings, that sort of thing. It's very disturbing, but it's important to understand that this is something that is a thing, that slavery is now more prevalent in the world today than at any time ever, even during the days here in America or other parts of the world where slavery was legal. And it's hard to wrap your mind around that sort of evil, but it exists, and one of the biggest targets for this is children. And this movie tells the true story of Tim Ballard and his fight against child sex trafficking. Tim Ballard is played by Jim Caviezel. He does an excellent job in this movie. Really, really good actor. Actually, everyone in here was phenomenal. The child actors in here, specifically the two, there's Eduardo Verástegui. Interesting side note, he actually was a friend of my husband's cousin when they were young kids, because Eduardo is from the very same place that my husband was from. So a little bit of trivia. So it was cool to watch him in here. The two child actors in here, phenomenal. They were so good. I was super impressed with how much their scenes or their emotional scenes just really grabbed you by the heart, or me anyway. I mean, there was a point in the movie, kind of early-ish on in the movie, and the lady sitting next to me was crying and wiping her eyes, and I got what she was feeling. I wasn't at that point, but I was really close to it, and I just reached over and kind of patted her on the shoulder. It was a heavy movie, but it wasn't oppressive. It's not like the type of movie where I would say, okay, that's one and done. I don't want to ever see it again. I could see myself rewatching this, because while it deals with really awful subject matter, they don't get explicit. You don't see anything bad happening to the children. You know that it's happening or going to happen, like a door is closed and you know what's going to happen behind the closed door, that sort of thing. But it also had certain moments of levity. There were certain moments where I kind of chuckled out loud. It wasn't anything that was slapsticky. It was just little brief moments of humor, and it didn't feel improper. It didn't feel like it was anything that was making fun of what the movie was about. It was just like little tiny moments in there, and it sort of helped bring a bit of to the story, just kind of, because you're kind of pent up, you're wound up a bit. This guy, he's trying to find these children. Now, the story of Tim Ballard with regard to the undercover stuff that he set up, see, I thought it was just going to be a story where, I knew it was based on a true story. I had seen the trailer. I thought it was just going to be a story about how he goes in to rescue these children, these two specific children. Then I watched the movie. Oh, and it does show at the very beginning, it shows clips of children actually being kidnapped and just taken, and it's chilling, really scary stuff. And that little child, oh, he was such a good actor. I thought it was just going to show, it was going to be kind of like an action-y type flick of him going in there to rescue these two kids and whatever, and the little boy gets rescued first, as you see in the trailer, if you've seen the trailer. Then he goes and tries to find the little girl. What I did not realize this was going to delve into was the very complex, a sort of undercover type sting operation he and some other people set up to try to capture or put an end to some of the rings that they knew were existing and rescue as many children as they could in the process. And at the very end of the movie, they do show video clips of those stings happening that they had portrayed in the movie. So that part was definitely true. What I think might have been fictionalized, and honestly, I do not know because I haven't had a chance to do further research. So if I find out the answer to it while I'm editing the video, I'll put it in here. What I think might have been fictionalized or dramatized to an extent or a certain extent, that's the sister of the little boy, she was so good too, was the storyline of the brother and the sister. That's not to say that there have never been a brother and sister similar to these two who were taken or whatever. I'm not saying that. What I mean is the story of his efforts to rescue them. I'm not sure how much of that was true, or if they wrote this in to kind of tell us Tim Ballard's story and his efforts to put a stop to child sex trafficking. I will research it. If it was true, it was phenomenal. And if it was true, I think there were things that might have been dramatized a bit. Just because it's a movie, they want to hold your attention, so they're going to sculpt this narrative that's going to be similar to the way a story progresses. That's just typically something that is the most entertaining, the most engaging, and that's certainly the formula that they followed here. However, this movie was very well done. I did rate it 5 stars on Letterboxd because I didn't really find any flaws in it. It was intense, it was sad, it was chilling, it was scary, it was nauseating, it was disgusting. And it was in a sense kind of faith-based because they do reference God's children and things like that and faith, but it's not something, and this was produced by Angel Studios. Eduardo was one of the producers of the film, and Eduardo and Jim Caviezel both are very much outspoken or not afraid to hide their faith. And they're both Catholics, and I remember Eduardo, when he came over here to the US, he was taking on roles that were kind of like beefcakey, and I remember thinking, oh, okay, so he's gonna be the Mexican actor that's the beefcake, that comes across the border and plays that sort of role. And then eventually I stopped seeing him around, and later he was like saying how that some of the roles he was given, they conflicted with how he felt personally, his faith, and so he didn't want to take on roles like that. So he started getting behind projects that he felt the most connected to, that didn't conflict with his opinion about certain things. And so while these two men are very much involved in that sort of thing, and while this was referencing on occasion faith and belief and God's children, and it'd be better to tie a millstone around your neck than to harm one of these little ones, that sort of thing, it's not fundamentally heavily into the faith-based narrative at all. It's really primarily about this terrible thing that is being done to so many children in the world. And for that reason, I feel like it's important that everybody watch it, just to kind of inform yourself. Now, obviously, this is subject matter that makes people uncomfortable. He does reference at some point that this sort of subject matter is too ugly for polite conversation. He's trying to talk someone into their help, and he was pointing out, if we just keep ignoring this type of thing, eventually her pain, which the little girl's pain, he's referring to her because she'd been taken, her pain is going to extend outward, and it's going to come to your shores, but it's going to, not your shores, he was like, it's going to come to your doorstep. And by that, I took it to mean so many children that have been mistreated, that have been abused in one form or another, so many by people in their own family, if not their own parents, but also in cases like this, with this stuff going on, this breaks people. This type of mistreatment, even exposure to things, even if nothing is done to you, exposure to things that are highly inappropriate for such a young mind. And this is why so many people are getting so up in arms about stuff that children are being exposed to nowadays in our culture, in our media. It's too young for their minds, it's inappropriate, and it does lasting damage to some children. So they shouldn't be exposed to that sort of thing, and they should be protected. So he was basically saying, because like I said, it screws them up many times permanently. Almost every single person that has committed a horrific act, and by horrific, I'm talking about like mass sort of acts of violence, serial killers, awful dictators. Almost every single one of those people you can trace back to an absolutely horrendous childhood. And by horrendous, I'm not talking about discipline by a parent, you're grounded, or a swat on the behind. I'm talking about full on, like, actual awful abuse, physical, emotional, mental, verbal, sexual. And this has ramifications that extend outward as that person gets older, and the damage that they inflict on people around them because of what was done to them. And I think that was the message he was trying to get across to this person he was trying to talk into helping them, is that eventually this pain, this suffering, it's going to come to your doorstep. You're going to be affected by it because it's happened time and time again. So I appreciated those sorts of messages that were put in there, and the importance of trying to take care of the most innocent in our society, children. I don't understand why this is such a controversial thing for some people, that when you try to protect a child from a certain thing, some people get so up in arms about it, and it just blows my mind. Anyway, I digress. I was going to get back around to other things about that. I've kind of gotten on my soapbox, but the plan that was shown to lure these child predators in was pretty interesting and intricate, but also something that it showed when the two children in here were initially taken was under the guise of, like, to make the parents feel at ease, and this lie was constructed and the children were taken. But something that struck me as it was showing the children, and they were having these photo session and like a modeling type of thing, right? It just made me feel kind of grossed out at the insidious nature that kind of goes along with modeling and young children and glorifying them, like beautifying them up, and these really little tiny kids, making them into what's fundamentally like a sex object. That's disturbing, and that's a thing that goes on all the time. And I'm not saying necessarily that people who are doing this they're really hurting their kids, there's abuse happening. I'm just saying that the message that it's sending, it's not, in my opinion, the best thing to be doing with young children. Because basically you're trying to adultify them. You're slapping all this makeup on them, and you're beautifying their hair, and you're putting them in these little skimpy outfits, and you're making them carry themselves in very suggestive ways that are just totally inappropriate for a person their age. And it's disturbing. And that sort of thing kind of feeds into this sort of thing that's happening. And that was just something that came to me when it was showing that particular scene in this movie. The pacing of the film I felt was really well done. It wasn't too fast paced, but it wasn't slow. I was engaged the entire time. The movie's about 2 hours and 11 minutes, and when the credits started, they showed on the screen that there was going to be a special message coming up, and like 2 minutes or something after the credits. And so we stuck around and watched it. It was basically Jim Caviezel was talking about how this movie had been made years ago, but there were just constant stumbling blocks put in the way of them distributing it, because this is not a big Hollywood studio production. And I don't know, for whatever reason, big studios didn't want to get behind it. I don't know why, but they didn't. Maybe they just feel like this is not subject matter that will sell. It's disturbing subject matter for sure, but this was a really well-crafted film, well acted, well told. So I think it's a shame that a bigger studio didn't get behind it, but it did demonstrate that you don't need big studio money to tell a good story. And this was very well done. They finally got it out, and he encouraged us, if we wanted to pay it forward by giving like a donation or buy a pack of movie tickets that they could give away to people, because he said he didn't want money to be an object. If you didn't want to go to the movie theater because movie tickets can be expensive, they would give free tickets out as people paid it forward by buying a block of tickets. And I'm seriously considering doing that, because I feel that the subject matter here is important enough. And I'll put a link, if YouTube will let me, I'll put a link in the description or in a pinned comment, or maybe I'll put it in my community tab. If anybody here is interested to maybe pay it forward as well and buy some tickets. So yeah, I appreciated this film. I don't have a huge con. The only sort of, I don't really have any con. I don't know why I said a huge con. The only con I could think of is they show at the end images of Tim Ballard and pictures of his family and his wife, and says that how his wife was one of his best support systems. And they do reflect that in the that's true. His wife is played by Paul Sorvino's daughter, and she does she is portrayed that way. She's a support system. She's behind him all the way. She doesn't get a lot of screen time. This is primarily about, and even though Jim Caviezel says this is not a movie about me or Tim Ballard, the movie is focused mostly on him because it's telling the story of him trying to fight these people. But Jim Caviezel did underscore the importance of how this movie is really fundamentally about these kids and trying to save these kids. So yeah, it was pretty impactful. I don't really have any cons at this point, except for the little teeny tiny con that I was going to say was that his wife, she wasn't utilized very much. But I can understand why focusing too heavily on the wife and him, focusing so much on that would take away a bit from the purpose of this whole story, which is about these children who are in peril. So, I was kind of surprised to see her in here. I didn't know she was going to be in here, but she's not in here a whole lot. But anyway, yeah, it's important subject matter, an important film, pretty touching, but it's not something that's so oppressively awful that you can't bear to watch it. It's just definitely disturbing subject matter, you guys. I mean, oh my God, the amount of people who have completely demented proclivities towards children is disgusting. And what's even more disgusting is that there have been attempts to try to normalize this type of fixation into like some sort of, I don't know, mental illness or whatever. Obviously something's wrong with these people. I don't think I was making myself clear enough or choosing the right words. The point I was trying to make is the attempt to try to turn this type of disorder or whatever into nothing more than just a simple orientation, a simple sexual orientation. Okay, back to the video. But trying to normalize it and insert this normalizing language into our vocabulary, and that needs to be nipped right in the bud. They're trying to call them MAPs, minor attracted persons. No, they need to be called what they are, and I know they have a problem, and they can't necessarily help it, but that doesn't mean their problem is something that's acceptable in society and should ever be acceptable or tolerated. I have like zero tolerance for that sort of thing. Don't be messing with kids. Don't be trying to normalize terrible behavior aimed at kids and involving kids. It's very disturbing that that's the direction that I have seen some people going in. And yes, some people have tried to go there. Fortunately, it gets shot down pretty quickly, but there is an effort made. And I see films like this as sort of a rebuttal to that, trying to shoot that down and just open your eyes to the ugly realism that is going on in the world when it comes to this. And it's not just children, it's happening to adults. And it's really sad and it's really scary. Anyway, I think I've gone through everything. I talked a bit longer than I meant to, but I do need to wrap this up because I'm getting ready to head out to go see Insidious: The Red Door. I had originally thought that I was not going to be able to film this until I got back, but I had time before I needed to leave. And so I'm going to wrap this up and we'll see you guys later. If you get a chance to watch this film, let me know what you think. I would highly encourage you guys to watch it if you can. Even if you can't make it to the theater to see it, streaming when it becomes available. It's important enough that I personally think everyone needs to see, know about, understand, be aware of, whatever. Pick your word. Okay, I don't have anything else. I need to get going. I will see you guys later. Adios.